If you're looking for an opportunity where you can finally get in on the ground floor,
here we go.
ARK also sees a 20-fold increase in terms of addressable market for this space. Forget about 10 baggers, let's talk 20. Enter the second generation of cell and gene therapy. Today's episode will have two parts. Part 1 will help you actually understand the terminology and the space so you're not a sheep, and part 2, we will get into investing in this space. I know a lot of you just want stock names, but I promise you if you slow down and truly learn about these topics, you will be much better suited to be a successful long-term investor. If you can't stand up in front of a room and defend and argue your reasoning for investing, you should not be making investment decisions on your own in the first place. Any blind squirrel would have had great returns over the past year, but some of you are going to be left standing naked when the tide goes out. But you know what to do if you don't want to be that guy or gal. The first big shift ARK is seeing is cancer therapy going from liquid tumors to solid tumors. Usually, treatment is tested on liquid tumors first, but solid tumors actually make up 88% of diagnosed cancers. A tumor is really just an abnormal mass of tissue that results when cells divide more than they should or don't die when they should. In a healthy body, cells grow, divide, and replace each other regularly. As new cells form, the old ones die. But when a person has cancer, new cells form when the body does not need them, and if there are too many new cells, a group of cells or a tumor can develop. Some tumors are benign or not cancerous, but others are malignant, which are cancerous. People often overlook the fluid-like tumors or liquid tumors, also referred to as blood cancer like leukemia and lymphoma. With most leukemia, there is not a tumor, making it really good at hiding and only leaving clues when something is wrong. The FDA approved Gleevec back in the early 2000s, the generic name imatinib, which is a type of oral chemo where patients could take a pill and it was shown to produce fewer side effects. This was a landmark drug that vastly improved the outcomes of patients with certain types of blood cancer that helped to establish a new group of drugs known as targeted therapy that has drastically changed the field of cancer research. Targeted therapies attack the cancer cells with less harm to normal cells and may also have fewer side effects than other types of treatment. As this chart shows, Gleevec went through 10 years of trials, 7 of which were on solid tumors. There was a 3-year approval timeline from the first test to approval with liquid therapy first, and then the 7 years for the solid. Applying a similar timeline, that means the FDA could approve the first CAR T therapy for solid tumors by 2025. So what is CAR T therapy?
The immune system defends the body against disease. T cells are one of its key soldiers, targeting infected or abnormal cells. But cancer can block those defenses. Now scientists are genetically engineering patients' own T cells to make them smarter and tougher at seeking out and destroying cancer. One version is called CAR T cell therapy. T cells customized to zero in on a patient's specific kind of cancer. It all starts when a patient's blood is filtered through a machine that separates T cells and other white blood cells from the rest. Scientists mix the collected T cells with a virus that has been disabled so it won't cause illness. Instead, that virus carries genetic instructions for the T cells to grow an artificial receptor called a chimeric antigen receptor, or CAR, that will track its cancer target and rev up for an attack. Millions of copies of those engineered cells are grown in a laboratory and given back to the patient intravenously. The first CAR T cells are being tested against types of leukemia and lymphoma that bear a marker or antigen named CD19. Once in the bloodstream, those CAR T cells home in on that antigen and grab hold. They release toxic chemicals that trigger a cancer cell's death. As one cancer cell dies, CAR T cells move on to the next, multiplying in the patient's blood until they're no longer needed.
The second big shift ARK is seeing has to do with stem cell transplants. Stem cells are just cells that do not have a specific job, function, or structure. They do have the potential to become any other kind of cell in your body. Your body uses these stem cells to replace worn out cells when they die. A quick fun fact, you completely replace the lining of your intestines every 4 days, and this process is accomplished by stem cells. Stem cell research is looking for ways to use these malleable cells to create new tissue to replace parts of organs that are damaged or diseased. So in this stem cell research space, there's a big transition underway that ARK is focusing on. The shift in oncology trials is from autologous to allogeneic cell therapies. And don't worry, this is not nearly as confusing as it sounds. Oncology is just the branch of medicine that deals with the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of cancer. Autologous cell therapy is a new intervention that uses a patient's own cells, modifies them outside of the patient's body, and then puts them back in the patient. Allogeneic, on the other hand, relies on donor cells. It's an off-the-shelf option in order to treat patients. And I've heard smart people pronounce this one allogenic, allogenic, allogeneic, allogeneic, so go with whatever you like. But remember, allogeneic cell therapy is off the shelf, aka donated, and autologous works with the patient's own cells. Auto does mean self, but in case you forget, think autologous, autonomous, the car drives itself, the patient's cells heal themselves. There are certain risks with allogeneic therapies, but they are well beyond the scope of today's video. Despite these risks, however, allogeneic treatment can create therapies at earlier stages of cancer and reduce costs by orders of magnitude. This is crucial for bringing new therapies to the mainstream. Among the gene therapy trials today, 40% of those completed were allogeneic, and ARK thinks this shift will continue, leading to a higher percentage of trials focusing on allogeneic treatments. Another big shift ARK is projecting is from ex vivo to in vivo gene editing. Ex vivo means the targeted cells are removed from the patient and the gene therapy is administered to the cells in vitro before returning to the patient's body. Now, don't get in vitro and in vivo confused. In vitro is just a process performed in a test tube or somewhere outside of the living organism. Now, moving to in vivo therapy, this is administered directly to the patient with the targeted cells staying inside the body of the patient. So simply put, ex vivo modifies cells outside the patient's body and transplants them back to the patient, while in vivo modifies a patient's cells inside the body. Once again, there are challenges with in vivo gene editing, but as you can see, the benefits greatly outweigh the challenges. In vivo is much more cost effective and easier to manufacture, thus making it easier to scale, and gives us more access to the liver, eyes, the central nervous system, and muscles. To date, the FDA has only approved 10 gene therapies. There are 712 active clinical trials underway, and 238 of them started in 2020 alone. Applying the typical trial fail rate with some improvements expected in the failure rate this decade, about 170 gene therapies are likely to be approved and commercialized this decade. This would make for a 23.8% success rate going from trial to approval and commercialization. ARK believes these allogeneic and cellular immunotherapies could create $250 billion in incremental revenues. Allogeneic therapies enable easier applications in earlier stages of cancer, potentially increasing the total addressable market by $70 billion. The combination of cell therapy innovation and allogeneic cells could add an additional $150 billion in market size, which would increase the overall total addressable market for oncology gene therapy by 20-fold to more than $260 billion. Not to mention, in vivo therapies could also enable gene editing to cure thousands of rare diseases over time. So this brings us to part 2, investing in this space. First off, remember, this space is extremely nascent, aka it's in its early days. CGT, or cell and gene therapy, accounts for just 1% of launched products in major markets, but this 1%, the CAR T cell therapy and other gene therapies that can treat these rare diseases, have proved to be transformative for patients, and there are hundreds more in development. With very exciting clinical results of CGT, the success rates of these products are higher than for their counterpart small molecule products because CGT tends to target specific disease drivers rather than broad targets like the small molecule therapies. 16 of the world's largest 20 biotech companies have CGT assets in their portfolios, but are moving very cautiously, with only 2 of the top 20 having CGT assets making up more than 20% of their pipelines. But as you can see from these charts, only 15%, or the blue portion of the bars, of the launched cell and gene therapy assets have originated from the top 20 biotech companies. This is a space where things change very quickly and there is plenty of M&A activity going around. For most investors, honestly, a fund like ARKG, the Genomic Revolution ETF from ARK, is going to be the best way to gain access to the rapid changes in this space. In future episodes, we will take a closer look at CRISPR, targeted therapeutics, bioinformatics, and other key pieces of the ARKG fund to help you understand the space, so be sure to subscribe if you'd like to learn more. But for investing in individual companies in this space, you should be asking questions about the technology the company is pursuing. Have they demonstrated proof of concept? Does the technology give them a first mover advantage in the market? Is the technology different than competing platforms? Given the rapid pace of innovation, are there risks that the technology in question quickly becomes obsolete? And look, even further than this, back in the 1990s, big pharma companies invested hundreds of millions of dollars into 4 pure play gene therapy companies, and then a few years later, investors fell out of love with gene therapy stocks after a damning report from a panel of experts at the National Institutes of Health, which basically accused the industry of overselling its achievements. And of course, there are always false promises being made in today's world, but today the technology is much further along as things have progressed greatly in the last 20 years. But I highlight this to remind you that the companies in this space have much longer than usual timelines, meaning they need massive amounts of capital to turn technology and ideas into actual products in a highly regulated, quickly changing space. But with that word of caution out of the way, the CGT market has been growing exceptionally fast as of late, with money flying into the space to combat the growing rate of chronic disease. We know the addressable market in this space is massive, and if we can spot breakthroughs a step before the rest of the world, there is potential for incredible returns. Global governing bodies are also now offering regulatory support to help fast track these breakthroughs to expedite the product approvals. But as mentioned, it's crucial to watch for the M&A activity, as this is a big deal in the CGT market. With that said though, CAR T cell therapies have gained significant traction in recent years and represent probably the single most rapidly growing product type in the market, generating revenue at a phenomenal rate. CAR T cell therapy is the fastest advancing technology in the treatment of cancer and has the ability to replace several existing therapies. A huge advantage with this therapy is the remission it can allow patients with blood cancer. Once the T cells are administered, they not only kill the tumor cells, but they also keep growing and dividing, providing long-lasting immunity against further tumor cell occurrences. The company Novartis has Kymriah, and Gilead Sciences subsidiary Kite Pharma introduced Yescarta. The potential of these two to cure adults is bringing a whole new level of hope. And then you have hundreds of companies entering the market developing new CAR T cell therapies that allow for the mergers and acquisition activity to scale. There's also a company like Cargen Therapeutics that alone has over 11 CAR T cell therapy products, and 5 of them are in clinical trials. The Novartis stock is ticker NVS, which is a 3.5% holding for ARK in ARKG with a value of around $450 million, and Gilead Sciences bought Kite back in 2017, Exhibit A of mergers and acquisitions, and Gilead Sciences is ticker GILD. But please do not take these as stock picks by me by any stretch, as Gilead has their hands in many other cookie jars, like dropping $21 billion on immunomedics that has weighed on the stock, and they're also heavily focused on hepatitis treatments as well. So if you're looking for pure play CGT companies, be careful, as these companies with strict focuses have huge appetites for risk, and they do have lean structures that allow them agility, but they often lack the scale and resources required to develop commercialization capabilities. That's why these pure play companies often need to be acquired to have any real shot at commercialization. Another company to watch is Exact Sciences, ticker EXAS. Exact Sciences does make up 3.9% weighting in ARKG with a value of around $500 million. But please take a moment to comment below if you'd like to see deep dive episodes on specific companies, as I would be happy to make that type of content. But that's all I have for you guys today. Please take a second to like this video if you learned something new. Consider subscribing for more investing content, and I hope to see you in the next video. I hope that you have a great day.